Hello and welcome back everyone, I'm Brandon, this is Born to Rant, and this week we are here to talk about what I personally think is one of the most imaginative science fiction movies of the first half of the 1990s. A movie that bridged action, science fiction, and ancient history, and it's the movie that solidified Roland Emmerich as a go-to director for big action movies on a mid-level budget. That's right, today we are talking about how 1994's Stargate came to be, everything that makes it awesome, and its legacy 30 plus years later. My history with Stargate doesn't start until a little bit later. It had to have been like 2001 or 2002 when my stepmom first showed it to me on DVD. And after that, I would rewatch Stargate pretty much any chance I had. Even though we owned it on DVD, if it was ever playing on cable, I would just stop what I was doing and watch it. This movie honestly felt like it was tailor-made for me the first time I saw it because I was obsessed with space and ancient Egypt pretty equally as a kid. Thanks to Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, space and Egypt are about the coolest settings you can have for an adventure movie, and Stargate has both of those. But the thing about this movie that really captured my imagination was the set design and the world it built. Like I said, I was pretty obsessed with Egypt as a kid. Like I probably did 5 or 6 different reports on ancient Egypt all throughout elementary school. And seeing these massive pyramids that were made just for this movie just really captured my imagination. And one of the things that I think Roland Emmerich does really well as a director is that he creates these larger than life worlds and he understands the importance of spectacle, but he also knows how to use his budget. The next time you rewatch Stargate or Independence Day, really pay attention to how much of the movie is people just standing in these massive sets having a conversation. Okay, so with that out of the way, I think now is the perfect time to look back at where the inspiration for Stargate began and how the movie came to be. So the story for Stargate actually begins all the way back in the 1970s in Munich when director Roland Emmerich first saw the documentary Chariots of the Gods, which if you don't know was based on a book by Erich von Däniken and is basically the starting point for the entire Ancient Aliens conspiracy. But Emmerich saw this documentary about aliens being responsible for all civilization and thought, I could make a movie out of that. So then in 1990, Emmerich met and worked with Dean Devlin on his film Moon 44, and Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich quickly became close collaborators. They talked about the central idea of aliens influencing civilization and came up with the idea of traveling via a wormhole through a gate and got to work, and strangely enough, Devlin and Emmerich are the only 2 credited screenwriters on Stargate. And a big part of that is the fact that this movie was financed independently and had a very reasonable budget of $55 million. Like just look at the scale of this movie and tell me it doesn't look like this thing cost closer to $90 or $100 million to make. Even adjusted for inflation, it's still impressive. So with their budget locked in and MGM handling the distribution of the movie, the team got to work on casting Stargate. Their first choice for Colonel Jack O'Neill was Kurt Russell from the very beginning, but Russell hated the script and turned them down immediately. So the production just kept asking and steadily increasing their offer every time until finally he said yes. And when Kurt Russell came aboard, they realized he'd been sent a much earlier version of the script by mistake, and both Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich admit that that version of the script was awful. So when Kurt Russell finally saw the shooting script for Stargate, he proclaimed it to be not that bad. As for the co-lead, Dr. Daniel Jackson, the team went after James Spader, who at this point was really known more for his dramatic roles and as a serious actor. But you know what? Let's just read Spader's quote about this movie because I think it sums up his feelings perfectly. Acting for me is a passion, but it's also a job. I have a certain manual laborist view of acting. There's no shame in taking a film because you need some money. Although both Russell and Spader have since said they actually quite enjoy the final movie and seem to have a good time working together. But the best casting story for Stargate comes from the casting of Ra, who was played by Jaye Davidson, who at this point had only done one other movie, 1992's The Crying Game, which Jaye Davidson received a Best Supporting Actor nomination for in 1993. And Davidson didn't really like being an actor and didn't really want to do Stargate when he was offered the movie, but rather than be a jerk and turn them down straight, he asked for what he thought was a ridiculous number.
$1 million.
and he was convinced that they would absolutely say no, but instead, Devlin came back and agreed. It sounds like while the movie was in production, Davidson was unfortunately battling an alcohol and drug problem, and this made him pretty difficult to work with on the movie, and reportedly Jaye Davidson hated his costume so much that upon finishing his final scene in the movie, he stripped naked on set and walked off to his trailer, not wanting to be in the costume a second longer than he had to be. Dramatic, sure, but that's some great Hollywood lore right there. Speaking of production, Stargate filmed in 1993 in the Yuma Desert in Arizona, as well as the legendary Spruce Goose Hangar in Long Beach, California. And this was a tough shoot. The temperatures in the desert were routinely reaching well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Geez, it's pretty warm today. He said, yeah, it's 126.
And because of the isolated nature of the film, the crew was having to pack equipment in and out of the desert every single day to make sure that it looked isolated. They even had a crew of 30 people who were in charge of raking the sand to get rid of footprints. And every person in the cast and crew was drinking a minimum of 5 gallons of water a day. After filming completed, Emmerich and Devlin began doing some test screenings, and the big problem that all of the audiences seemed to have with the movie was Ra. Specifically 2 things. They didn't like that Ra was a human being working for the aliens, and they really didn't like that we didn't see Ra die at the end of the movie. So the team pivoted and reworked the movie so that Davidson's character was actually possessed by Ra and not just working for him. And they also shot some footage so that you could see Ra actually die at the end of the movie. The thing I found most interesting about this though is that originally Davidson's voice was not modulated at all. And Davidson in particular thought his performance was just awful. So when the decision was made to rework his character to be possessed by Ra, it seemed the easiest way to do this was just to modulate his voice and use some CGI over his eyes to make Ra really feel otherworldly and dangerous. And I think that that is what makes Ra work so well in this movie. And because he was so disappointed in his performance, Davidson was actually very happy with this fix. And on October 28th, 1994, Stargate was released into theaters where it landed at the #1 spot at the box office, and on its opening weekend it made a total of $16.6 million off of its $55 million budget. And the movie would go on to make a worldwide total of $196 million, making it just profitable before it hit the home video market. While audiences really seemed to enjoy Stargate, critics on the other hand did not. It currently hosts a 54% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which means only 54% of the professional critics who reviewed this movie gave it a positive review, and a 42 out of 100 score on Metacritic. But as you can see, the audience scores are quite a bit higher, so I think it's safe to say that this movie was a hit, and it has quite the following. And with all of that out of the way, now seems like the perfect time to dive into this movie and talk about everything that makes it awesome. And so the director's cut of Stargate actually begins with 2 pretty solid prologues. We get the quick one of Ra being abducted in 8000 BC, and this one in 1928 of the Stargate being discovered. And obviously it looks cool as hell, but what's even cooler to me are the fossilized Anubis and Horus that are found, which to me means that Ra sent these 2 through the gate, not knowing it had been buried, and these 2 were instantly crushed to death by sand upon emerging from the Stargate. We then cut ahead again, though this time only about 70 years, and we meet our main character, Dr. Daniel Jackson, played by James Spader. And the presentation we find him giving is not going very well. He's trying to convince a room full of scholars the ancient Egyptians did not build the pyramids in Giza. He doesn't know who did though, and with that, there's a mass exodus from his lecture. I've always really liked the way that Spader plays this moment, with his volume coming down in little increments as more and more people exit the room, until finally he's just speaking in a regular conversational voice. And throughout Jackson's presentation, we see an older woman in the back of the room watching him, played by Vivica Lindfors, who sadly would pass away less than a year after Stargate was released. After Jackson has accepted his defeat and exited into the rain, he's asked by a random member of the Air Force to meet with someone in a car, and it's revealed to be the old woman Catherine is the little girl from the second prologue. And this is a perfect example of Emmerich exposition. We don't see that Jackson's been thrown out of his apartment and that he's broke. Catherine tells us, and it's what convinces him that he has no choice but to join up with her. Also, shout out to the rain in the scene. It looks great and just adds a nice little extra level of drama with Jackson standing outside alone. We then cut to our introduction of Kurt Russell's character, Colonel Jack O'Neill, and this sequence does an excellent job of setting up who O'Neill is and what he's going through. When we first meet him, he's sitting in a kid's bedroom bedroom with long hair, staring blankly at a wall and holding a gun. Two men come in and inform him that he's been called back to active duty. He doesn't say a word. Honestly, Russell doesn't have a lot to say in this movie. His character is very much the strong silent type. But as the two men go to leave, we get even more excellent Emmerich exposition explaining to us that the reason O'Neill is in such a bad place is because
his kid died. Accidentally shot himself.
Emmerich really is the king of tell, don't show, isn't he? We then cut to Jackson's arrival to an underground Air Force bunker in Colorado, and this whole sequence is really strong and does a great job of reinforcing that Jackson understands ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics better than almost anyone on the planet. We also get great, albeit brief, performances from Leon Rippey, Ray Allen, and of course the wonderful Richard Kind. But obviously the only reason to talk about the stuff in the bunker is to talk about the most iconic shot in the movie, the turning on of the Stargate, which I think still looks cool as hell today. And the reason it looks so cool is because it's using real footage and compositing to create the shot. That water, that's real water. Special effects supervisor Jeff Oakham and his team used a large vat of water, stirred it to create a cyclone effect, and then blasted it with 120 psi of compressed air. They shot that and then just laid that footage on top of the Stargate. And you know why this shot works? Because the Stargate is also completely practical. They built this. It's real. Those rings even moved all the way around. So the Stargate opens and our team head off on their adventure. The team emerges inside a pyramid, and once they emerge, we get this really wonderful shot of this practically built pyramid. And here I'd like to stop and just talk about the production design, score, and cinematography real quick. First of all, production designer Holger Gross and his team knocked it out of the park because every single set in this movie looks amazing. And this giant pyramid they built in the middle of the Yuma Desert is just massive and incredible. As for the score, this moment is also where it really begins to stand out to me. The music swells as Jackson and O'Neill turn around and see the pyramid with the three moons behind it, and David Arnold's score throughout this movie is fantastic. For me, it invokes all the best parts of a John Williams adventure score. And this was only the second time David Arnold had ever scored a film. As far as the cinematography goes, cinematographer Carl Walter Lindenlaub just absolutely nails the look of this movie. It feels so bright and vibrant, like we're in a real desert, because we are. Honestly, I think that Stargate deserves its place alongside Dune, Lawrence of Arabia, and Mad Max Fury Road as one of the best looking deserts ever captured on film. So our team arrives on the planet of Abydos, and pretty quickly Jackson has to reveal to them that he actually can't do what he said and get them all back home, which understandably causes some tension amongst the group of soldiers he's with. And oh, hey, French Stewart is here in his film debut. All of this leads to Jackson's dumbass getting picked up and dragged by this cool creature, and this is really our first mini action sequence, I suppose. It's nothing special, just this doll version of James Spader getting dragged through the desert by a horse wearing a costume. You know what? Okay, I take it back. It's pretty cool. Our team then finds this massive mine with people slaving away. We're introduced to Alexis Cruz as Skara and Eric Avari as Kasuf, and I love their meeting and the chocolate bar and them seeing Jackson's necklace and bowing. So Kasuf takes our heroes to the village, and we get Jackson trying their food and saying it tastes like chicken and doing his little chicken impression that the locals get a kick out of. And we also learn that riding is forbidden in this culture. We're then introduced to Millie Avital's Shaori, who's given to Jackson as a wife, which like fully shocks him, but luckily he's got himself a smart wife who knows how to find this old tomb that gives us a brief history of how Ra came to Earth and how the Stargate on Earth was buried after a rebellion, and that's why Ra outlawed riding on Abydos, and because of this, Jackson is also able to begin to understand their language a bit more. There's also this really great scene between Kurt Russell and Alexis Cruz, where Cruz is kind of imitating him, and Russell gives the kid a cigarette, which he doesn't like, and then the kid tries to touch his gun, and this is honestly the moment where you realize, oh, this is why they hired Kurt Russell. He can bring just the smallest bit of gravitas to these little scenes. Like, he barely speaks in this scene, but you understand everything that's going on, and because of that clunky exposition earlier in the movie, we know why he gets so upset when the kid tries to touch the gun. And back at the pyramid, where we've left French Stewart and a couple of other guys, Ra and his crew show up, and this is just another excellent example of set and special effects designs working together, because Ra's ship is just another bigger pyramid that slides over the existing pyramid. It's pretty badass and just looks so cool, and then the soldiers are pretty quickly taken out by Ra's guards, who look cool as hell, but more on them in just a minute. And the next morning, the team head back to the main pyramid, only to find Ra's ship is now covering it, and the rest of their team are gone, which gives O'Neill the idea to just blow the whole thing up with the bomb he brought with him. And just, I like how anxious O'Neill is to use the bomb right from the moment they cross through the Stargate. Like, as soon as they're there, he's ready to blow this thing up. However, as O'Neill tries to get the bomb ready to go, one of Ra's guards arrives and takes them with him to meet Ra. The whole introduction to Ra is one of my personal favorite moments in the movie. I think the costuming design here is on another level. The helmets worn by Ra's guards, resembling Horus and Anubis, are so cool. And we've got Djimon Hounsou in one of his first film roles, who I personally always enjoy seeing pop up in movies. And Jaye Davidson as Ra is just so cool. The way that Jaye moves is so flamboyant and fluid, yet his voice literally sounds like pure evil. It's just an excellent way to convey this otherworldly villain. And I like how in true action star form, Kurt Russell steals the guard staff to try and kill Ra, which really only succeeds in getting Jackson killed, because a group of kids creepily surround Ra before O'Neill can do anything. So he's thrown into water jail with the rest of his men, and Jackson is put into Ra's regeneration chamber and brought back to life. So after being brought back to life, Ra explains his grand plan to Jackson. First, he's going to make him assassinate his friends and publicly join sides with Ra, and if he doesn't, Ra will kill him and all of the villagers, which I think is probably a bad plan long term for Ra, but whatever. And after Jackson kills his friends, Ra is going to send the bomb through the Stargate with a bunch of the mineral they mine, which will increase the explosion 100-fold. However, that night, Showery shows Skara and the other teens in town what Jackson told her about their history, and they decide they're not going to take this abuse from Ra anymore. So the next morning, when Jackson is supposed to kill his friends, he's instead flagged by the villagers, who show him that they have the soldiers' guns, and we get a nice little action sequence of the guards being taken out and the villagers and soldiers escaping together. And that night, the team make a plan for a full-blown rebellion. And the next morning, Jackson, O'Neill, and a few of the locals bring a shipment of the mineral to the pyramid, and they spring a surprise attack on the guards, taking them all out easily. And I love Kurt Russell's little one-liner here.
How you doing?
It makes me want to go watch Big Trouble in Little China and Escape from New York, I'm not gonna lie. And in the crossfire of this little battle, Showery is shot, so Jackson's gotta abandon the plan and take her to Ra's regeneration chamber, which leaves O'Neill behind to set up the bomb, and the villagers outside to defend the pyramid the best they can. And one of the best moments in the movie is here when the villagers and soldiers have been completely surrounded and are about to get the firing squad by Ra's guards, when all of a sudden Kasuf and the other villagers come running down the hill to save the day. There's also this fun little fight between O'Neill and one of the guards that ends up with the guard getting his head cut off by teleportation, which is probably my favorite way I've ever seen anyone beheaded in a movie, if I'm being honest. There's also this fun little moment where the heroes realize they can't disable the bomb, so their best move is to just teleport it up to Ra, which I personally think is a pretty dope way to take out the villain. And I do think it was the right choice to go back and shoot some additional footage so that we see Ra actually die. There's no question of whether he'll come back and be a threat again. He is fully atomized. So the movie ends with Jackson staying behind to be with Showery. O'Neill has learned the value of living, and these poor soldiers, the rest of them are just alive and tired and want to go home. So the team head back to Earth and the movie ends. So over 30 years later, what is the legacy of Stargate? I think it's considered a schlocky science fiction classic. It's a movie that doesn't take itself too seriously and winks at the audience here and there, but it's still an incredibly fun adventure and one that I'm happy to go on anytime. There were also 3 spin-off TV shows for Stargate: SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe, which ran for a combined total of more than 350 episodes. I've actually never watched any of the shows, but I'm definitely open to it, so if you all want me to watch the shows and make a video on each one, let me know in the comments, and if there's enough demand, I'll do it. There have also been multiple attempts to get a direct sequel to this movie made. Originally, Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin had envisioned this series as a trilogy, and as of 2023, MGM, who owns the rights to Stargate and are now owned by Amazon, were in in the works on a reboot of some sort. But as of the writing of this video, there haven't been any real updates in almost 2 years. I'm sure a Stargate reboot will happen eventually, but who knows when that will be or in what form it will be. I don't know if it'll be a TV show, a movie, a series of movies. It's really tough to say. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. I'm Brandon, and this is Born to Rant. This is a completely independent channel, and I use absolutely no AI in the making of my videos. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We release new videos covering all of your childhood favorites every Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.